My name is Cari Hacking, Carihacking.
My name is Milton Hacking, Milton Hacking.
Nice. So where do you live, and have you always lived here? And make sure you say Wyoming in there somewhere.
Yeah.
So where do you live, and have you always lived here?
So we live in Casper, Wyoming. I'm originally from Illinois, Macomb, Illinois, and so we've lived in Casper for about 5 years now.
What about yourself?
Before this, I lived in Rock Springs, but I grew up in Green River, which is about 10 miles away, so more or less the same town.
So what would you miss most if you had to leave Casper tomorrow?
You know, I think I would miss my neighborhood. My neighbors are amazing, and we really love it where we live. And if I had to leave Casper, I think that I would miss the scenery the most.
I would definitely be missing my neighbors as well, because we live in one of the best neighborhoods ever. And then, believe it or not, the weather. I love the cold weather, and then the summers are a little bit vicious for me. So, other than that, the winters are long, so it's pretty nice.
So, what's the one thing you wish people who've never been to Wyoming to know about Wyoming, and also about Casper? What would you wish the rest of the world would know this one thing about Wyoming and or Casper?
All the public land. It's not just the parks, Yellowstone, Tetons, Devil's Tower. There's so much more land that people don't realize. If you go off the beaten path, you can find some amazing things out there. And then, go ahead.
I just think it's a place like no other place in the United States, at least in my experience that you've been to. The calmness. There's really not much sense of urgency coming from Illinois, which we had more of a sense of urgency and everybody had to get somewhere. And that's not the feeling that you feel out here. And so it's a calmer way of life, in my opinion, not coming from a background like this.
So, what's your origin stories, and how did you guys get to this moment? What's your short and dirty version of that?
Do you like?
Go ahead. This is your bread and butter.
So I was a travel nurse, and so I went to Rock Springs, Wyoming, which I met Milton, who worked on the ambulance, and and we had a really bad evening with a lot of sick patients, and we met over chest compressions is how we really first met, and we kind of just started talking after that. And then my assignments are only 13 weeks. And so at the end of my 13 weeks, I left for a short period of time, and then I came back, and then we dated for a while, and then we got married.
Yeah.
So you had to add.
So we lived in Rock Springs for 2 years after we met, and got married there. And then she got a job offer for here as the coordinator, so we moved up here and both ended up getting a job, and here we stay.
Yeah. So what is the work you guys do? What does it entail on a daily basis? What normally happens?
In my particular role, I run a trauma program, so my day is really kind of making sure I check the flow of the trauma patients and that the system is working appropriately. And that could be anywhere from going to visit patients, to help with patients, to talk to physicians. So that's really my primary role, is to make sure the functionality of the trauma system at my facility functions day to day.
And then for me, I'm paramedic at a hospital-based system. So we'll run 911 calls, interfacility transfers, either nursing homes in the town, out of towns, even out of state if necessary. And then we also do hospital to hospital transfers, out of state and in state. and then we're also used as kind of a Swiss Army knife of the hospital. When we're not running calls, we go down to the ER, help them out, do IVs, and just basically wherever they need extra hands, that's where we go.
Gotcha.
I think you need a shirt that says Swiss Army knife. I've never heard that.
So, in 2 words or less, 1 or 2 words, how would you describe the year 2020, and then why did you choose those words? Why did you choose those words?
Eye-opening.
Shit show.
All right, what's the backstory? Why eye-opening? Why shit show?
For me, it was just with this pandemic that hit, everybody kind of did what they were supposed to at first, and then it just kind of like, all right, this is, we flattened the curve a little bit, and then everything went out the window. And then once the George Floyd protest came, and everything went to hell in a handbasket, and now people aren't trusting the cops for whatever reasons that they have personally, and now there's big demonstrations. The economy's doing not great by any sense of the word. So it's, for me, it's just kind of a shit show.
Eye-opening. What's that?
You know, I think you get caught up in these mundane, day-to-day activities, and you feel that all of these things are important. And then when the pandemic hit, and you got all of these things taken away, essentially, for a while, or for whatever period of time, you remembered what's actually important. So I think eye-opening, in a sense, to me, that there was that, and then, you know, you would scroll through Facebook, and then you would see all these news feeds, and they make me anxious, very anxious. And one day I got to the point where I just shut up. I couldn't do it, and I didn't want to listen to it. And, you know, I wasn't not a believer in God, but eye-opening. They don't have treatment. They don't know what's going on. What do you turn to when nobody knows the answers, right? And so I think for stability and sustainability, people have a spiritual sense that they turn to, or at least I did, in trying to eye-open that in my life. And so with that, and then, you know, the protest and everything, you turn on the news and it's more anxiety than it's ever given me before. And so I think it's really eye-opening about a lot of things and what you see. And so for me, that was eye-opening in my own life of what I think I needed to change.
Okay. So describe the moment COVID-19 became real to you, and then how did it make you feel when it became real?
So COVID-19 became pretty real to me when we started to first get in other patients from the surrounding areas, just because their facilities could not take them and properly care for them that they needed to. So they'd send them to us, and as a paramedic, we would meet the flight teams out on the tarmac, bringing patients in, and then with all of our protocols changing as far as being careful what we give to patients so we don't aerosolize the virus, and then really kind of being limited on how we treat our patients with breathing difficulties or any type of fever whatsoever. That's when it kind of really was like, all right, we're here to play.
What was going through your mind and your heart at that time when it was just like all of a sudden all this stuff was happening? How did you feel?
It was a little bit of anxiety because I've got a 2-year-old and my wife's also in the medical field, so not only am I a first-line person to treat the patients with absolutely no information of the patient, our dispatch system will ask the COVID questions if they've traveled, if they've had a fever, if they've had a cough. But there's been multiple times where patients will tell the dispatcher, no, we walk in and they've got a fever, they've got coughs. So we basically just have to start not trusting what people are telling dispatch and just treating everybody as a possible of having COVID. So that's when it kind of is like, well, shit, I really have to be careful so I don't bring this home to my family.
What's you?
I think the real portion was in the actually planning of the family life. So putting work aside and not seeing it and the patients there, but it was more, as he talked about, we have a 2-year-old, but we both work in the medical field. So we both could bring it home. He's more susceptible in his role than I am. We slept in separate bedrooms, I think, for the first month and a half. And then he would take off his uniform in the garage, and, the normal greeting is to see his 2-year-old. And then he comes upstairs, and he has to go directly to the shower, so he has to lock the bedroom door so he can open it. And she would sit at the bedroom door, and she would cry. She would cry because she didn't get to see her dad. Well, he's got to go take a shower because we don't know what he's been exposed to. And so that was difficult. And, she's only in part-time daycare. We had to put her in full-time daycare. Well, we made the choice to do that. So it was less exposure for the two of them as opposed to her and I. And what are we going to do if we both get sick? What are we going to do if we have a massive amount of patients and we both get called to work? Where are we going to take our daughter? And so I think that was the reality in the planning of the family logistics on getting ready for whatever was going to come, including scrubbing the camper and going to quarantine him in the driveway. It's big.
So how did daily life change beyond what you've shared with us so far? How did at first? What was like the immediate changes in your life? Work, home, whatever.
I would say vitamin C. I bought so much vitamin C and taking it daily and made sure she had it. But we didn't even kiss each other goodbye or anything. And if there was, you would come home and there was a possible exposure. And so then we really stayed away from each other. Or he went to the basement. The day-to-day was like you were on edge, right? If you didn't know, well, maybe they had COVID, maybe they didn't, maybe I was around them. Did they cough on me? Did I wear the right mask? Did I clean my desk enough? Did I wash my hands enough? And so you're really like obsessing almost. You get this obsession because, again, you don't want to bring it home to your kid, but you don't want your kid to take it to the babysitter, and you don't want to give it to other people. And so I think the day-to-day was, I myself was on edge.
Like on cue. How about you? What was your daily shift early?
It was a complete change of how I would do everything as far as getting home from work, seeing her, because we have our own little thing that we do, from a kiss to a little nose rub and a headbutt.
And nucks and high fives.
Nucks and high fives.
It's a process.
It can take a 5-minute process. So if it's not up to her standards, we got to do it all over again. So that was a pretty heart-wrenching thing that we had to stop. And then just pretty much everyday life, you couldn't take her to the grocery store. You can just like, oh man, we're out of milk, let's just hurry and go grab some. Someone had to stay with Charlie, so you had to plan out far more things in advance. That other times are just mundane. You just be like, oh, okay, let's go. So it was a complete 180 to what we normally do. Thanks, dude.
Did you see any habits or routines or family patterns that have changed that as things, whenever we get through whatever we get through, would you like to keep that you started doing because of COVID?
For myself, I think one of the biggest things is, I said before, I really had to stay off of any social media because it really gives me anxiety. So I will sometimes look at it, not often, and so I decided I was going to spend more time with her, and try to make the honest effort to, keep my phone down and really just focus on my family, because I don't even know, what tomorrow brings as far as what I'm going to have to do. So my family is more important, and not that they weren't important before, but I think you see it a little bit differently when you have to go through lengths to protect them that you didn't have to do before. if that makes sense. So I
Sure.
think,
Fell out of there.
you know, those habits, and we read more books. So
As far as the habits that I like to keep going with, we've always had a clean house, just because with our situation with the 2-year-old and dogs, it was constant cleaning. And ever since COVID happened, we ramped it up so much more. We started Cloroxing doorknobs, cabinets, fridges, the fridge handles, almost to a point where it was an obsessive thing, but it was kind of a necessary thing as well, just because we do have such the high risk of becoming infected with the COVID.
I'm sorry, this is just
That's
too.
what I'm doing.
This is too good.
he wants to interview her.
That's just. This is gold. All right. She's just the best character ever. All right, so what's daily life like now? Like
Today.
yeah, we're 100 days in ish, right? So now that we've gotten through the initial, what the hell's going on? We got this stuff. What is your daily life like now that we kind of got into a rhythm of sorts with COVID?
You still be as careful as you can when you're at work.
She knows what she's doing.
That's enough, Sissa. Come here.
Charlie, all done.
Okay.
Charlie Brown, all done.
Mom, can you get her? Please.
Come on, let's go in and watch. Let's go watch TV. Let's you and Grandma go watch TV.
Little days of our lives. Throw that there. Little
no.
Maury Povich.
Oh no, she runs the remote.
Oh, okay. Yeah, good.
She runs the remote better than I run the remote.
So I think
Let's start from. I'll just ask the question, so it's a clean start. Now that we're 100 days in, what's your daily life like now? How would you describe that?
you try to be as careful as you can still, right? You wear your mask when you're out in public. I make sure to do grocery order pickups, and then maybe one store run every couple weeks. So you still try not to expose yourself, along with still supporting people that are struggling. You have businesses that haven't been open very long, and so I think we're trying to support them. So you order in, once in a while, but it's a normal pattern, right? It doesn't even feel anymore. It doesn't feel abnormal because you've been in it, and it doesn't take that long to develop new habits. And so I think you're in those. You still strip in the garage when you get home from work, and so you don't wear your work clothes inside, and you still are cautious when you wash them. So I think it's a normal.
Yeah, I mean we've gotten pretty good to where it's just a more fluid system now, and even Charlie, once I get home, she knows that I'm going straight to the shower, and that she'll see me after I get out of the shower, unless I'm running late. But she's now getting to the point where she's used to, I've got things to do before we can come have our morning greetings. So
what's been the biggest challenge for each of you throughout the pandemic?
I would say the biggest challenge for me has been to keep my own sanity. By nature, I'm a normally anxious person on a moderate level, and with COVID-19, I've had to figure out how to rein some of that in, because it's over the top every time I hear somebody, because we've had people we've been around that have had COVID, but not necessarily like in our circle that have been super sick from it. And so you don't, they're right when you say you don't know from who has it, and who doesn't. Are your allergies kicking up or are they not? And so I think reining in my anxiety has been my biggest thing to function daily.
What you mean?
For me, it's just trying to keep my patience in check, because I can't go out and do things that I want to as quick as I want to. I tend to be more of a, let's just go get it done, get it over with, and then we can come back and relax, do whatever. But as far as that, it's just like, all right, well, now we got to plan things. I have never planned a thing in my life. I hate planning. I can't stand it. I'm more of, well, what are we going to do today? I don't know. Figure it out once it happens type of guy. So this entire planning thing is having to set up everything far in advance to make sure everything goes fluently and everybody needs to be where they need to be with who they need to be. Just drives me nuts.
How does this compare? How does this challenge compare to any other challenges, big challenges in your lifetime to date? How does COVID-19?
I feel that this challenge, compared to anything else, I mean, I think it's the true meaning of adapt and overcome, right? You didn't get a choice. You didn't get a choice because they shut everything down and they made these things mandatory. And so I think, moving forward, well, when you face a big challenge, whether it's moving or building a house or, doing anything else, you're like, well, I think I can handle this, right? I had to completely change my entire lifestyle and I had to figure it out. And we're going to figure out this. And so I think mentally I made it better to overcome other challenges, in my personal opinion.
I agree with Cari. It made me better because it's not something you should go fix right away, because that's just kind of my nature. Got a problem, go fix it, take care of it, done, over with. This problem's not going away anytime soon. We're still finding out more information about this every day, so we're still adapting. We're still changing everything we do, constantly. So you really have to kind of keep up on your information and then adapt to it from there. So it's a constant gather information, adapt to it how it needs to be adapted to, and then just keep going. It's a marathon that's probably not going to end for quite some time, if ever, if it's something that's just going to stay around. So that's how it is for me.
How do you think your daily life will feel like 2 years from now?
You mean rating it? How good it will be?
How do you think it'll feel?
I think life will feel good, because I think if you can be in this pandemic and you can be, along with the protest as well, right? We're facing multiple things and across the nation. I think if you can keep a positive attitude in that, then in 2 years from now, you're going to probably feel pretty amazing on an emotional state and just how you see the daily living of everyone or your own life.
How about you, Milton? How do you feel?
2 years from now, I think it's just going to be a normal now, or then, because everybody's had 2 years to figure out their life, figure out what they need to do, and by then everybody's going to get their routines, and humans are a routine type person, animal, however you want to state it. So once everybody gets used to what they're doing on a constant basis, then you're going to stop seeing all the protests and people saying, you can't make me wear a mask. You're right. We can't. Have fun with your consequences. Whether they be good, they be bad, neutral, everything you do has a consequence.
And the challenges you see within your work or within the community you're in, what excites you about solving them?
In Casper itself, and I think I've seen this in other places as well, the community response to the situation in support of us healthcare workers was phenomenal. Anywhere from them getting donations to feed us every day in different departments, or the howl for Casper. I don't know if you've seen this on Facebook, but every night at 8, they howl for the healthcare workers. They've done it in front of the hospital. But you could hear it on the deck, and the dogs would howl along with them. They would just howl, and so you knew it was 8 o'clock at night. And so I think the support that the community could show for that, but it was also then the other support for the other businesses who were not able to be open, or if they were, they weren't getting enough business and they were going to shut down. So, you know, I've seen my coworkers and my friends, they've purposely eaten out at ordered from restaurants, ordered in, and, you know, bought extra supplies from somewhere, or, you know, paid somebody to do some work for them to try to help out. And that's what was really cool, because, you know, paying daycare extra money even if your kid wasn't going, but the coolness about that was that they showed support for other people, even if they weren't healthcare people. And so I think as a community coming together, I think that was amazing to see.
I'm gonna agree with Cari on that. We live in a decent sized town, but it's still a very tight community. So there was quite a bit of support for everyone. If you were directly affected by the COVID, if you were a healthcare worker, if your business shut down, or if it was on the brink of shutting down, there's just an outstanding effort by the entire community to stand with one another.
So you mentioned George Floyd and the protests and all that. So what was your reaction to the George Floyd incident? And then kind of share for us what the community's response to the incident, but also the kind of the emergence of the Black Lives Matter conversation that are really front and center now.
So when I watched it, it was, in my opinion, pretty obvious that with the particular George Floyd incident, that was a big screw up, and they need to be punished for it. But now that your people are wrapping around all cops are this way, that's what kind of I don't find very, very fond of, because I've got a lot of cops that are friends. I work with cops on a nightly basis, and there's some amazing cops out there. It's every field you have a few bad apples. You're not going to get away from that. So you're taking the bad apples and throwing them all in and saying this is what happens. I don't believe it does, but at the same time, I'm also not African American, so I've never seen what they've gone through. I can only judge on my experiences, what I've seen out on the streets, working with the police department and with people that are involved with the police department in one way or the other, and as far as if they need medical treatment at that time.
Cari, where's you?
You know, for the actual incident, I don't know that there's any argument to say that, I mean, that was completely inappropriate. It was awful, and it should never happen to anybody, no matter what race you are. But it did happen. And so we had protests here in town, and they didn't get anything like you had seen in the big cities. I think that there was a couple people that maybe got a little bit out of hand, but personally going through that, so I didn't go to a protest. I work and take care of my kid, and I'm not taking her because there's COVID everywhere, and I felt that it was dangerous too, right? It wasn't even mainly to do with I don't want to get COVID. I'm not taking my kid to somewhere dangerous. But for me, my husband worked that night, and I was terrified to send him to work because I didn't know what was going to happen. So is he going to be the next person that gets shot, or is he going to get involved in something, and then is he not going to come home, because I don't know how bad this is going to get. So we, you know, we prepare for the worst, and so we were prepared to take on more patients and prepared to do this for the protest. But on a personal level, I didn't know if my husband was going to come home, and I was like, can you please wear a bulletproof vest, and can you please go get one? And he borrowed one from another paramedic, and he wore one because he knew I was worried, and thankfully it was fine. But dealing with, like, are you going to get COVID or are you going to get shot tonight? You know, and I think so for my family, that was concerning because, you know, we're there to help, and I don't know, even, you know, being in the middle of helping, are we going to get hurt?
So, thinking of the next 5 years, what are the one or two words you would choose to describe how you feel about life in 5 years?
I think life in 5 years would be more of a rejuvenated experience. By then, I would hope that we'd have a better understanding of the COVID. There would be changes to how discrimination happens in America. Hopefully less, if not completely eliminated, but that's not going to happen. There's always going to be somebody that does not like someone else just because of their beliefs. But hopefully we can lower that down significantly. And then with getting some bills passed or some laws passed, they can do what they need to do to make it a better place in the next 5 years.
What you care?
I think it's just forward momentum, right? How can you go back from where we're at right now? How can you go back? So I think in the next 5 years, I think, and I hope, right? It's my hope that we're better, and it's my hope that we love each other more, as I think that's many people's hopes. And it's my hope that we can do more with less, because that's a big thing that we've learned in this pandemic. So that's my hope, for us to be happier and a happier community and a happier nation.
What would you wish people would know what it's like to be a healthcare provider, a frontline worker? What would you wish they knew about your life?
I thought about this for a long time, looking at people. I told you at the beginning of the interview that I went to a restaurant and nobody was wearing a mask. And I have to sit there with my family and try to still protect them. And it's an insult to me and my profession for them not to protect me if they have COVID. And I have to take care of them anyways, right? If they come in and sick and I still have to take care of them, but I wish they knew that it was insulting and in my opinion, putting our profession down, and that you're not respecting us because we still have to be in the middle of this. And so I want them to mask, and I want them to follow the guidelines, whether we know that they're going to be the best guidelines ever, and the accurate ones, but I want them to know that they need to follow, what's put out there by the CDC, because that's all we know.
I would love them to know what we see and what we do firsthand with the COVID, what patients are going through, what true pain and anxiety look like when
Describe that for you.
So when someone can't breathe because there's so much fluid in their lungs, they can't catch the breath, they've got a fever, and they are utterly helpless at that point. When someone is on the verge of actively dying. So it's an eye-opener. And if more people understood what that looked like and was able to see what true terror looks like in someone's eyes, then it would be a interesting thing. I bet there would be a lot more masks worn.
I mean, I'm just thinking about this. You, paramedic and trauma, you guys see some horrific things.
Every day.
Every day.
Every day.
It says it's your everyday thing. Is there any other thing, eye openers that other people should know about it? That you can see it firsthand. So, like, what would get someone's attention if they just saw a glimpse of 5 seconds of your life, or what you see?
People would protect themselves more, including to not drinking and driving, or not wearing a seatbelt, or their helmet on a motorcycle. I could name so many things, because they don't understand it until it happens to them, until a mom loses a kid, or you lose you lose a husband because he didn't wear a seatbelt. And so I think if I could say anything, I think it would be to protect yourself. I do trauma, and so every day you see people. Most traumatic accidents are not accidents; they're incidents. It's reckless behavior that we already know to avoid, and we don't avoid it.
I'm gonna piggyback off hers. It's basically if they could just walk in our shoes for a little bit and just actually see what we go through, then it'd be an eye opener for a lot of people.
So is there a question I should have asked you that I haven't so far? Is there something that I should? You're like, why hasn't he asked this obvious question?
I can't think of anything.
I got nothing for you.
So let me ask you this one. We're getting to the end here, and then we're
good.
We're good.
all right. But we are literally at the last two questions. This one I'm adding is like, what's the Wyoming way? What's the Wyoming mindset? How would you describe a person from Wyoming if someone is not from Wyoming?
I feel like I can answer this question better than you because I come from Illinois. So the Wyoming way, I would say in general, we are the cowboy state. And I think for the most part, they act like cowboys. And not that they don't care, but it's almost more reckless behavior in some ways. And so I think that there's a lot of that mindset going on. But to counteract that, I think that there's not a sense of urgency, like I had said before. And so I think the Wyoming way of life, for the most part, is amazing, but it also can be reckless because the attitude, I think, for the most part is, I'm going to do what I want, and there are not many rules. We don't even have a primary seatbelt law. So the rules are not, we can go buy a gun tomorrow and we're just going to have it at the house. That's not how it works in Illinois. And so I think the Wyoming way is very, very cowboyish. How about that?
How would you describe it since you've lived here your entire life?
People in Wyoming, they will try, for the most part, they will try to just tough everything out. I've seen some pretty incredible illnesses and injuries, and when I ask people, why didn't you call earlier? Oh, I'm fine. No, you were not. So I think it's just more of where we live is kind of a rugged place, and that's just the mentality of people. It's like, well, it'll be fine. I got stuff to do today. I'll go to the hospital tomorrow.
What's the difference between Utah and Wyoming people? Like the mindset?
Easy.
Go ahead, Cari.
You lived in Utah. You have to answer
You have
this.
to answer that.
It's depending on where you're at in Utah, because you've got different sectors. So you've got like the Wasatch Front, very city oriented, very here and now, and then on the western side, northwestern, you got a lot of the oil fields. So it's mannerisms are completely different. Towards the Wasatch Front, people want their things there, here, now, fast. You can't do it fast enough. And they're just the exact opposite of Wyoming, in my opinion. It's always fun at football games.
Imagine. So this will be on the internet. We don't know when someone's going to be watching it. Someone's going to watch it.
Sure.
Might be now, might be later, might be us in 10 years looking back and saying, wow, what a beautiful night that was. What's the message you want to convey to the person watching this right now? Whatever, for this moment, what's the message that you want to say to them?
So what I would want to tell people watching this is, for the COVID-19, protect yourself so you can protect everybody else around you. It's not just because you're being told to do something. The people that are telling you to do it are very smart. It's a new virus. We hardly know anything about it. Some people might say we know all sorts of things, but there just hasn't been enough time. So protect yourself so you can protect everybody else. That's my biggest thing.
I think it's trying to keep a positive attitude so you can make that contagious to everyone else around you. To stay positive for your families, your coworkers and everyone that you're able to touch, and make that contagious, because that positivity and that support to them is what will get us through this in one piece, instead of millions of pieces when it becomes more violent, and if it wrecking families and wrecking communities. And so I think positivity spreads more than people realize, and to spread that is what we should be doing.